I be able to discharge my duty as a father, to prepare my child to face the world. This sentiment was expressed by President Obama in a letter to his daughters when the family was moving into the White House. He wrote, "When I was a young man, I thought life was all about me, about how I'd make my way in the world, become successful, and get the things I want. But then the two of you came into my world, and suddenly, all my big plans for myself didn't seem so important anymore. I soon found out that the greatest joy in my life was the joy I saw in yours. And I realized that my own life wouldn't count for much unless I was able to ensure that you had every opportunity for happiness and fulfillment in yours." Obama, 2009. Roger Federer too shared his realization of this enormous responsibility. "Before, I guess, Mum and Dad were everything. But now, in my case, I had 2 new girls, and all of a sudden, they are completely dependent on you. And there's a 3rd generation." Federer, 2009. How does one prepare a child to face the world? Talking to one's child about the good and bad is one way, but most conversations end up being perceived as sermons. How does one communicate with a generation that just does not have the time to hear anyone, leave alone listen to them? Children, especially teenagers, just don't want to talk to their parents. Give a child some excellent books, and hope and pray that they will read. A lot of prayers are needed, as data shows that children don't really like to read anymore. A study published in 2011 by the National Literacy Trust UK found that only 3 young people in 10 read every day as a leisurely activity. More than a fifth of children and young people, 22%, rarely or never read unless they are forced to. More than half, 54%, prefer watching TV to reading, and nearly a fifth, 17%, would be embarrassed if their friends saw them reading. Clark, 2012. As a parent, sharing your experience so that your child doesn't make the same mistakes is another way of teaching them. Each one of us has so many stories to tell, so many incidents that we can relate to, and so many lessons that we have learned through experience. But one must remember Charles Wadsworth's words. By the time a man realizes that maybe his father was right, he usually has a son who thinks he's wrong. Over the years, based on my experience as a pediatrician, I have developed a method to communicate with our son. Over the last 2 decades, I have interacted with children and teenagers every day. I have spent hours observing how they interact with their parents. I have seen them passionately make a case, declaring their independence. I have seen parents express their exacerbation when teenagers vociferously voice their opinions. I have sensed this desire from parents to figure out how to communicate with their children, to communicate effectively, seeking a meaningful interaction and a heart-to-heart conversation. Not every day, but at least sometimes. This opportunity to study the behavior of children and adolescents, their interaction with their parents, and how they relate to adults gave me the insights that I needed to develop this method. This book is an attempt to share my experiment. As for my personal experience as a parent, I have always made it a point to try to get 15 minutes of undivided attention from our son, Devang. I would try to get this time with him when he wanted to. That was the challenge I took on. It would not be a fixed day every week or every other week, because this would have then become a formal activity, and that's something children and teenagers dislike. The very purpose would have been defeated. It could not be a sermon. It had to be a 2-way conversation, with me nudging him to talk about some recent incident. I would then dip into my limited repertoire of stories and incidents, and find an example that would fit in with the mood. Each story was constructed in a way that it touched upon a value that I believed was important. Thankfully, the internet was at hand to provide the details that I needed. Often, he and I would together search the web for more information, with him leading the way.